Hello, everyone. So excited to be here. And it's awesome that you already had an intro to the pipe function because it will make an appearance later in this presentation. So very nice intro. All right. So I was building full stack React apps for a number of years, and I happily put up with the complexity and struggle required to do so. And I did that because I loved building UIs with React more than any other way. But the honeymoon ended. And I became increasingly frustrated with REST APIs, GraphQL APIs, configuration setup, and just everything it takes to make a full stack app these days. And anything that got in the way of me building features slowly depleted my morale. I really wanted to love full stack web development again. I wanted to be extremely productive again. I wanted to focus on building features instead of messing around with all the other junk. So I decided enough was enough, and I set out to build the best possible developer experience for building full stack React apps. So there were two things that I had to have to achieve the dream that I had for this user experience. Number one, it had to be monolithic. And that means that it's all one thing. So there's only one thing to reason about when you're developing your application, and only one thing to reason about when you're deploying your application. And so everything's all in the same code base, and it's just one thing. So it's much more simpler than like a front end and a back end and having to wire them together. So secondly is no API. Now I got into web development with Ruby on Rails, and of course Ruby on Rails is server-side rendered. There's no API for most of the views, and it's so simple and productive and efficient because you don't have this API layer that is like getting in your way all the time. This API layer is the biggest source of complexity and just frustration for building React apps and really any type of single page app. And so I wanted to get rid of that and get back to that simple productivity that Ruby on Rails provided, but also had a hard requirement on using React. So I thought, well, I mean, we can do server-side rendering with React, and maybe that's just what we should do, is just build a nice framework around that, and that'll be the next Ruby on Rails. And in fact, that's when I initially announced Blitz 11 months ago, almost exactly. That's what the first prototype was. It was just server-side rendered, and it had setups for like controllers and things similar to Rails. But I wasn't happy with it because it just like you miss out on the whole dynamic part of React apps where you have like loading stuff on the client with APIs and so forth. And so I just wasn't happy. And so one day I was laying in Thailand thinking about this, and I asked myself, what would this look like if it was easy? And so I thought, well, I guess it would be, you would write a function that runs on the server that does your server-side business logic, talking to databases, etc. And you could import that function directly into your React component and just use it without messing with APIs or anything. So I was like, wow, that would be pretty awesome. That could be a real game changer if it was possible. And turns out it is. So let's get into Blitz, the nitty gritty, and how it makes you productive, what it is. So the first thing is that throughout that entire time of just frustration with other stuff, one thing constantly shown through the mess, and that is Next.js. So Blitz is built on top of Next.js. Next is a fantastic, super solid foundation for building full stack React apps. It's a hybrid framework, which means that you can do pretty much anything that you can dream up possibly, all within Next. So you have React, of course, you have server-side rendered React. You can have static static pages like create React, for example. Thirdly, you can have static site generation like Gatsby, and then you can also have API endpoints. So it's like everything you need for a full stack app. But Next.js itself is very bare bones, right? And so you have to build everything around it. And Blitz is that thing that brings all the other integrations and conventions and everything that you need for building Next.js apps. So I'll go through our foundational principles. I'm not going to go into each one, just highlight them. So the first one is full stack and monolithic, which I pretty much already explained. API not required. Convention over configuration. Loose opinions. So loose opinions in contrast of strong opinions. Blitz is a lot more, has looser opinions than Ruby on Rails, for example. Ruby on Rails has a lot of opinions that if you try to go outside of that, it's quite painful. Like if you don't want to use active record in Rails, it's kind of a Wild West, right? And so Blitz is much more flexible and less prescriptive in that manner. Number 5, easy to start and easy to scale. So you have to have, the beginning has to be easy to get started, but then that thing actually needs to last and perform for your business. 6 number is stability, and especially in the fast-paced world of JavaScript. So one thing we're going to do for this is once we get to 1.0, we're going to have a very stable and predictable release cycle inspired by Ember. Not sure on the details yet, but Ember, how the Ember release cycle works is every 6 weeks is a new stable release. And the next stable release is in beta for 6 weeks. And so there's time to prove out the bugs. And then there's also a long-term LTS release, long-term stability release, released every 6 months. And so we're gonna do something similar to that. All right, and lastly, community over code. We really value community, and we care about community over perfect code or whatever. It's about the people. And if we don't have people, then what are we even doing? Okay, so the first thing that you really kind of notice with Blitz is that it does all the Menial setup for you. Okay, so when you run there's a command blitz new from the CLI, and it'll generate a new app for you. And it'll generate a nice folder structure, so you don't have to go to Stack Overflow and say, how do I organize my files? It'll already give you a starting point. Of course, you can totally rearrange it if you want, but it gives you a nice starting point. ESLint is set up and configured for you. In fact, just this week, we added a ESLint a Blitz ESLint preset. Okay, so now there's just one line in your ESLint config. I'm using the Blitz preset, and it's based on the Create React app ESLint and includes everything you need for TypeScript and so forth. Thirdly is prettier. Code formatting is set up and configured for you. A Husky for Git hooks, so that whenever you run git commit, it'll automatically lint the code that you're committing and run prettier on it. Jest is set up, and we also have a Blitz preset for Jest, so it's a really nice integration. We include there's like 10 packages that you need really to work with Java or TypeScript and so forth, and all of those are included for you automatically by Blitz. So you're set up for your test, and you have a database set up. So by default, right now you have a SQLite database. We'll be adding a prompt in the future that allows you to toggle between SQLite and Postgres, and then possibly others in the future. But you're already set up out of the box, ready to go to start building your application. And then forms. So when you're creating a new app, we prompt you to choose between React Final Form, React Hook Form, and Formic. And you can choose one of those, and it'll scaffold out a nice form wrapper for you that takes care of validation and TypeScript types and so forth. And then also a wrapper for your input field that's ready for you to style or customize as you see fit. All right, now a big one is new apps have user sign up, login, and log out already set up for you. So as soon as you generate a new app, you can go to the webpage and enter email, password, and log in. And so this is one of my favorite features because well, number one, it's just a pain to deal with, authentication, right? And secondly is the default, if you have to do it yourself, you tend to lean towards Auth0 or some third-party service because, well, it's going to be easy, right? Because they do it for you. Well, it turns out it's not so easy when you actually try to do it. So like, for example, Auth0 is difficult for using local when you're running locally because you have to deal with the different URLs and it's a mess, right? So we include, Blitz has a built-in session management system, custom built based on a thing called super tokens. And so it's awesome. All right, and then next we have a reset password flow already in your app. And so that's already done for you. And we have just tests for that. So it's fully tested. And that most of that code is generated in your app. So you can easily customize it if you need. All right, now let's talk about the another key part. So Prisma is a next generation ORM for Node and TypeScript. And of course, it works with JavaScript, plain JavaScript as well. Prisma 2, this is specifically Prisma 2. Prisma 1 had a GraphQL and some other stuff. Prisma 2 is a kind of a stark departure from Prisma 1. So forget everything you know about Prisma 1, if you know anything about it. And Prisma 2 is the new Prisma. It is an ORM. It has nothing to do with GraphQL, but it is a really awesome interface for your database. It provides a fully type-safe client for your database for reading and writing to data. And then secondly, it has declarative migrations. So it's basically a full replacement for Active Record in Rails, or I think it's Eloquent in Laravel. So here is what the Prisma schema file looks like. And so you have, you're defining your database. In this case, is Postgres. You have a user model. You can see all your fields, the type, whether it's an int, date, time, string, whether it's required or not. You can set a default, relations, roles, etc. And so this is, you just put in here whatever you want your database to look like, and then run Prisma migrate, and it will migrate the database, or it'll migrate the database for you, and it'll generate SQL files that you can customize if you need. So you have the full power of SQL at your fingertips. And then they will also be adding some features for nicer data migrations using TypeScript. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, now the other, okay, one more thing before I go in here is that Prisma comes in Blitz by default because we think it's the best user experience for most people, but it's not required. Blitz is database agnostic, so you can use any other database or ORM or anything. We have an example in the Blitz repo of using Fauna, which does not use Prisma. Hopefully Prisma will support Fauna someday. You could use TypeORM or anything else like that. So keep that in mind. All right. So the Zero API data layer. Now this is like the pinnacle of the Blitz features. This is the single biggest thing to know about Blitz and what makes it different than anything else that has ever existed ever before, as far as I know. All right. We abstract the API into a compile step. Okay. So there is an HTTP API. There's an API that connects your front end to your back end. But as a developer, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to build it. You don't have to fetch from it. All that is handled for you automatically, unless you need to opt into, and do it manually yourself, which you can. But for most things, it's done automatically. All right. So this allows you to import server code directly into your front end. Okay, it sounds crazy. But what happens is that compile time, that we compile that thing out, and then so your server code never ends up in your front end, but we swap in our API implementation. So what you're going to write mostly in Blitz for your server code is Blitz queries and mutations. These are not GraphQL. There's no GraphQL in Blitz, but we use the same nomenclature of queries and mutations for reading and writing data. Now, these queries and mutations are just regular asynchronous JavaScript functions. Okay, so you can do anything that you can do in Node.js. You can send emails, talk to third-party APIs, talk to database, etc. These functions always run on the server. And of course, you can add an API if you need. So one thing, I might as well go ahead and talk about it now, is how to use mobile apps with Blitz, all right? So if you don't have a GraphQL API, how are you going to use a mobile app? Well, you could add a GraphQL API just for your mobile app. Like a lot of times, the requirements you have for mobile apps are different than your web app. And so maybe it makes sense. And some people are doing that as just add a GraphQL API endpoint to your Blitz app and then use that with your mobile app. Totally fine. Or you can reuse the auto-generated API from Blitz, and you can use the same authentication system and so forth. We don't have any documentation up for that yet, but we will get there. And then the longer term goal is to generate, there's two things. First thing is generate an API client so that you just have a library that you just run like Blitz SDK, generate SDK or something. And then you can just import that code in your React Native app, call it just like similar to how you would in the Blitz, in the React components in the web, you would do that in the mobile app. Okay, so that's a good start. And then secondly is just a fully integrated first-class experience where you import your queries and mutations directly into your React Native app that's in the same repo, and it would just all magically work. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to get that to work. That's going to be one of my big focuses for this year. After 1.0 is a really nice mobile app integration. Okay, so how does this work? Well, we literally compile a Blitz app into a Next.js app. So one of the early contributors, Rudy Yardley, built a custom compiler that takes all the code and then transforms it into a valid Next.js app. So we take your queries and mutations, transform them, and turn them into API endpoints in Next.js. And you can see all of that generated code in the .blitz folder in your repo after you run Blitz build. So here's a sort of an architecture diagram of how this kind of looks. So on the left is a server-side rendered page, and you can see it has code that runs on the server and on the client. And then on the right side, we have a client-side rendered page that only runs on the client, but it loads the data from the server through the auto-generated API. So this gray box is what Blitz takes care of, and you don't have to know about it. So the dotted lines represents your function import. You import the get listing query into your page or update listing mutation into your page, and then it'll automatically use that generated API endpoint. And then this also demonstrates that the same query you can import into your server-side rendered page, and you would call that thing directly in the server code. And so in this case, there would not be an API call, but it would just be, you would be talking directly to the database through your get listing function. Okay, so now let's go dig into what some actual code looks like. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you generate a new app. So you run Blitz new Frontmen in this case, and you can see it asks you for a form library. I have picked React Final Form. And then this is all of the files that it generates for you. So you can see we have a nice setup for environment variables, your ESLint config, so forth. We have all of the auth code. So login, sign up, change password, forgot password, reset password, your pages for that, and you have your form, default form components, some default pages like index underscore app underscore document 404 page, and then blitz config.js, which is same as next config.js, same format. Database file, which has a schema, your Prisma migrations, and a mailer for forgot password mailer, and some test stuff. Okay, so it sets all that up for you, and you can go into that directory. And now we'll go into VS Code and take a look here. So this is your package JSON. We have a number of nice scripts here for start, build, lint, test, etc. Some config items set up for you, and you can see there's a number of dependencies here. Not too many, because there's Blitz includes a lot of things that you need for ESLint and Jest, but that's all abstracted away nicely for you. So you have, yeah, looking good. Okay, so you at the top level folder here, you have an app folder, which is where most of your app code is going to go. Database code, which has things like your Prisma schema, which I already showed you an example of before. So by default, it has a user model, a session model for your login sessions, a token model for reset password tokens, and this can also be used for like email confirmation and anything of that sort. We have an integrations folder. That's a good place to put integrations with third parties like Sentry, MailChimp, Stripe, all of that sort of stuff can live in there. We have a mailers folder to put in type of things for sending email, public for static assets, and then a test folder for test utilities. So you can see there's Jest config, very simple, works great. We have a Babel config, simple, works great. ESLint config, simple, works great, and etc. So let's go into the app folder, and you can see we have there's an API folder in here. So this is where you put any API endpoints. You have a pages folder in here to where you put any pages. Now you'll notice that this is a little different than Next.js. Next.js requires your pages to be in the top level or inside a source directory. But in Blitz, you can have a pages directory nested inside app, and you can actually have pages, multiple pages folders. So for example, inside auth, we have another pages folder, and all of these pages folders are merged together at build time, but it allows you to organize pages by domain. So especially as you grow your team and you have different teams focused on different areas, then you can just put those pages in that area, and so everything's all kind of self-contained in the same area. So like, for example, auth is all in here. So if you want to delete auth, you can just delete this folder, and it takes all the auth pages with it. So it's really nice. And then users. So this is where any type of model. So if you have users, I would go in here, projects, tasks, whatever the main models, they would all go inside here. And then inside core is where you have general app-wide concerns like components, hooks, layouts, etc. Okay, so let's just start this. Go back to my terminal here and run blitz start. Blitz S is a shortcut for blitz start. I like shortcuts. So all of our CLI commands has a shortcut for running them. Okay, so now I'm going to open this up. All right, so we have this nice getting started page, and you can see that we can go ahead and sign up. So and we're signed up. You can see we have a user ID 1, user role. All right, we can log out, log back in, and oops, you can see we have error validations already in here for you. Forgot password. So you can see that all works too. Okay, so I should note that what I'm showing you right now is the Blitz Canary version. Okay, so there, Blitz Canary 0.30.0 has a bunch of changes compared to the latest stable release, which is 0.29.0. So if you're starting a new app today with Blitz, I would highly recommend using the Blitz Canary. So you can install Blitz at Canary, and it'll install the Canary version, because it has a bunch of changes that I don't want you to have to make in like a week or two whenever it's a stable release. So everything you're seeing here is Canary version. Just know that. So let's go back to our code for sign up and look at how this works. So we are going to start in app auth mutations, and we're going to go to the sign up mutation. All right, now here is your mutation file. Okay, so it exports a JavaScript function, and look at this. There's a pipe function, and this was just added recently. So if I kind of separate this out a little bit, you can see it's. Let me just make it a little bit more readable. There we go. So this exports a function, and so we have a pipe, a Zod schema. So if we go over to validations, you can see we have a schema using Zod as a really awesome input validation library. And so we're saying, hey, the email must be a string, it must be a format email, and then also have the password, which must be a minimum of 10, a maximum of 100 characters. So go back over to the sign up mutation. So this first pipe.zod takes in that schema, and it's going to enforce that input data is correct. It'll throw an error if not. Okay, and then in here we have just asynchronous function where the first parameter is the input data and the second parameter is the context. Okay, so this pipe is a little bit different in that it also has a second parameter, which is context provided by middleware. And so the first thing we're going to do is hash the password. We're going to call db.user.create, pass in the data, which is the email, the password, and give them a role of user. Okay, so this is using Prisma. So you can see it's really nice, simple to use. And after we do that, we're going to call context.session.create. And this is how you create a new user login session. And you pass in the user ID, roles, and any other data that you want, like current organization, anything that is kind of critical to how, the user identity. And then we return that user, okay? Now notice that this has a fully typed. So this user with TypeScript here says, hey, that's going to have an email, an ID, a name, and a role. And that comes from Prisma from that database schema. Okay, so back over here where we have a user. And so that comes from there. Now you can see it has tokens and sessions as relationships. So we could, if we wanted to, we could say, hey, we also want tokens true. Okay. And that will, this turn result is now going to have a tokens array, which in this case, you don't want to send tokens to your front end. That would be dumb. But that shows you the power of Prisma and TypeScript. So it's really sweet. Okay, so now that you've seen this mutation, what happens on the server, let's go over to our sign up form. And right here, you can see that we import that thing that we were just looking at, the sign up mutation. We also import a use mutation hook from Blitz. And we set up this mutation by using the use mutation hook, pass in that sign up mutation resolver, and it gives us a function to call, and then it also has other things in here like is error, is loading, stuff like that. Now, this hook is provided by, or is built on top of React Query, okay? So React Query is is another kind of core underlying component of Blitz, which is, it's awesome. If you've used it, you know it's awesome, and it's just awesome. All right, so now we have this form thing. So this is using the provided form component, form wrapper, I should say. Let me just show you that quickly. So core components form. Okay, so this is imports React final form, and look, like this honestly is kind of gross code, but all of this is necessary to make TypeScript really work nice with this form. And every one of the form things that we have has code that looks similar to this, but it allows you to pass in a Zod schema, and it'll take the TypeScript types from that schema automatically, and everything will be fully typed for you. Okay, so it's really nice. So try not to be intimidated. It does validation through that Zod schema, and then it renders the default kind of form thing, error message, a button, and then this is like where you could style the form as well. Okay, so let's go back to that sign up page, the form. So you see we just pass in a submit text. I'll give us a button with that name, pass in the schema, which is that same sign up schema that we use on the server to validate the input. We use it here on the client for client side validations, which is awesome. I'm so excited about this because you just define the types one time and use it on both the client and the server. And so you know it's always in sync. All right, and then our on submit hook, we call this mutation function, okay? And you can see that the values here are fully typed correctly, email and password, and they're both a string. And then the result of this is also going to be fully completed via TypeScript. Come on, show the type result dot, okay, there we go. Email, ID, name, role. All right, and that is all based on, it comes all the way ultimately from the database schema, all the way out here to your front end. So it's really slick. Thank you, Prisma. The fact that Prisma was coming out was one of the big reasons I actually started to make Blitz, because I knew that, like, all right, finally we have something that that would fit good in a full stack framework. Okay, now notice how we do, actually, I'll come back to that later. Okay, so we've done sign up flow. All right, let me quickly go through forgot password flow. So this is forgot password mutation. And you see that we have the same type of thing, pipe.resolver. We use pipe.zod and pass in a Zod schema for forgot password, which has an email. And then we have this function that takes the email, which we know is now valid. And we're going to get the user from the database. We're going to generate a token. We're going to hash it, set an expires date, and then we're going to create the tokens, etc. And so this is all generated for you so that it's easy to customize. Like there's this kind of trade-off between having all of this code abstracted away into Blitz, and then it's like kind of a mystery, and then it's not gonna have the option that you need, and then we start adding a million options, and then it's confusing and hard. And so for now, we have the approach of generating this code into your app, and so you have full control over customizing anything you need, because auth code, if you have any type of sizable business, you're going to have all sorts of complex requirements, and we don't want to get in the way of that. All right, now let's take a look at this forgot password mailer here. And so we have the send email thing. We have this little abstraction. Actually, it's not an abstraction, it's a pattern. Okay, so forgot password mailer, pass in the email to send, the token, and then send. Now let's go look at this and see what this is. So go to mailers, forgot password mailer, and we export this. It's a little pattern. So it takes in, we set the URL that's going to be for your server, and it's going to send you a reset password page, and then send the token. So we set up the message from to subject HTML. And then we have the inside the send function. If it's production, this is where you need to add your own production email integration using Postmark or SendGrid. But in development, we use preview email, which is a dependency that automatically opens the email in your browser. Okay, so it's in development, it just opens a web page. And it's really easy to test your emails. So this is very simple right now. Eventually, we might add more libraries, abstractions around it to improve it, but it's a great starting point. Okay, so now let's do something new. So we're gonna go back to terminal, kill our server, and we're going to let's say we're building this project, this app, and we want to add a projects model to it. So like we're doing type of a project management tool. So we're going to call Blitz generate all, and that's going to generate all the possible files that we have. So you could do Blitz generate model, Blitz generate queries, mutations, pages. You can look up the docs, but all will generate everything that we can do. We're going to generate a project, and we're going to give it a name that's a string. Okay, so you can add in the field names here. And we're going to call that, and ta-da, you can see it has added a project model to our schema. It has automatically added the ID, created that, updated that, and then the name field that we specified. And then it also generated all the pages for this. So this is all the CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. So it gives you, you can list projects, create a new one, view one, or edit one. And then you also have the queries for get project, get projects, create project, delete project, and update project. Now, what is on Canary right now that what this code generates is not production ready code. It's very rough, and we haven't updated it in a while, but we will be updating it soon with production ready code using Zod schemas and all of that. So keep that in mind. Right now, it just kind of puts the files in place, and you're going to have to customize them, but this will get much better soon. Now, okay, so let's do what it says here. Run this migrate command. So we have to migrate the database. Okay, now I can run Blitz start. Okay, and just reload our page here. Okay, now we're going to go to /projects, and you can see that it shows a list of projects, which right now there's nothing. So we will click create project. This takes us to projects new. Right now, this, like I said, this is just very, very basic. So we click the submit button. It says, hey, success, and it takes us to view this page. And then it has a edit page. You can click submit, and it'll just change the name. You can also delete it, and that would do that. So now you can see it here. Okay, so super slick. And I'll show you what the code that we generate currently. So let's close all this stuff up. App, all core, DB. Okay, so under app projects, it generated queries, mutations, components. So get project query. Now, so this one, see, we're not using pipe in here yet. So we'll eventually do that. But this shows you how that it's very simple. All this is a function that takes some input data as a first argument and the context provided by middleware as the second argument. And here we are doing context session.authorize. And so this requires that a user is logged in. Now, if we wanted to enforce a certain role like admin, we could say, hey, authorize admin. So if you're not an admin and you're not logged in, you're not getting in here. Okay. So it's super slick, already built in for you. And you can actually provide custom adapters for this function to have all sorts of advanced authorization stuff. So very simple. We call database project, get that project. If it doesn't exist, the TypeScript server needs restarted, which is why these things aren't working here. Okay, so same thing for mutations. So export a function, first authorize it, create the project. See, this is very basic. We're not validating the input right now using Zod, which we need to, but that's, you can add that, and then we'll make the generate better soon. So let's show you. Here is some code that I have taken out of one of my production Blitz projects right now, and so this shows you like what a real world. In this case, this is a query I will give you. Okay, so this is a get project query, and we have this Zod schema. So we're going to say, hey, you need an ID to view. So there's going to be an ID of the project that you want to view, and then organization ID is optional. So this means that, let's say you have multiple organizations, users can belong to an organization, projects can belong to an organization. So by default, you're going to view, let me go, sorry, back up. So in this resolver pipe, first thing is we run the Zod schema, validate the input. We're going to call authorize, pipe.authorize, which is going to ensure that the user is logged in. And then we have this utility that says set default organization ID. So this means if you're not specifying a certain organization, we're going to use the organization of the currently logged in user, or the organization that the currently logged in user is viewing, because the user could belong to more than one organization, right? So it's which one is currently being viewed. And then we have another pipe utility here, which is authorize admin if not current organization. So if you're trying to access a project from an organization that you're not currently viewing, then you must be an admin. Okay, and so this is a very common pattern that I use throughout the app. And then, so now once we get inside this actual resolver implementation, we know that the input is valid, the user is valid, and all we need to do is just go ahead and try to get that thing from the database. And so we add project where ID is equal ID and organization equals the organization that is set, and that ensures that the user is getting the correct project that they are authorized to access. Okay, and then if that's not found, we throw an error. Otherwise, return that project. Okay, so I'm very happy with this pipe function. We just added it this week, and I'm so excited about it. So it's awesome. A lot of us are really excited about it. So one thing that this really cleans up is there are 0 manual TypeScript typings. Okay, so before, so if we go over here, so you see there's a manual type here, you specify the type here, and then when you do with this, like for this code here, there's a ton of manual explicit TypeScript types, but using the pipes, it's all inferred. And so it's much cleaner and simpler. It's awesome. All right, here's the utilities, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. So the default organization ID, so you have to use generics here so that the types flow through properly. But the first argument is just some input data, and then the context, which we can get the session from. So we're going to return the same input that came in. We're going to return that, but we're also going to ensure that a user ID is set. So if it's passed in, use that. Otherwise, default to the currently viewed session. Okay, and then the authorize admin. So this uses the authorize if utility. And so the first thing is going to be a function that takes that input and context and says if you are not, so if the organization isn't even there at all, it's going to throw an error. And then if the input doesn't match the currently viewed user, then it's going to enforce the admin role. Okay, so this is, it's a little bit kind of like hard to understand, but that's why you put it in utility and give it a nice name, and then you can use it everywhere in your project very simply. Okay, so I think there's, I'm coming towards the end here. Let me show you error handling, which is something that I love in Blitz. It's so nice. So what should we do? Let's try to access a project that doesn't exist. Okay, so in this case, we're going to go to a page with an ID of a project that doesn't exist. And this line is going to execute right now, or right here. It's going to throw a new not found error. Now, this is an error that you throw on the server. Okay, so think about like what would happen, or what should happen, or what usually happens. What usually happens is this is inside your API, and your API is going to return maybe an error response, maybe an OK response with an error object inside of it. And then on the client, you would, this is outside of Blitz, like what would you do? On the client, you would read that, and you would say, okay, if there's an error, I don't know, what do you do, right? You gotta check if it's actual error, and then you could create a new error on the client, or just, I don't know, it's confusing. It's kind of a pain. But in Blitz, it's very simple and intuitive. Okay, so if you throw an error on the server, it will be automatically thrown all the way up the stack into your components. Okay, and so if we go over to projects, pages, let's see, pages, projects, to view a project. And actually, I haven't shown you this either. I should show you this. So this is, I'll get back to the error handling shortly. So we take the get project query and use query hook, and right here, this use query hook, we pass in that query function, and then the argument is the second thing. So where the ID equals project ID, and this returns project. Okay, and before that, so we actually get the project ID from the URL using the use param hook. And so it's going to get that ID, pass it into the query. The query is going to return the project, and then we render that project. Okay. You'll notice that there is no if loading, show this, if else, if error, do this, else actually show this stuff. And that's because concurrent mode is enabled by default in Blitz apps. So this uses suspense. We've been using this for, I mean, almost a year now, and everybody really likes it. It works really good. It's so nice for it removes all the ugly if else code in your components, because if it's loading, it's going to throw up to this loading thing, which is here, suspense fallback loading. Okay, so that's how you handle loading. And then errors are going to be thrown up to an error boundary. By default, there is an error boundary in your very top level root app component. And so that's where errors are going to be going. Okay, so now get back to this error handling. If this ID doesn't exist and this get project throws an error, that error is going to come up from the server, is going to come out through this component, and it's going to go all the way up the stack until it finds an error boundary, which in this case is an underscore app, the very root of your thing, of your app. So here we have an error boundary component, and here is what it's going to display. So it takes an error. If the error is an instance of authentication error, show a login form. If the error is an instance of authorization error, display the error component, which is going to be, sorry, you're not authorized to access this, like a 403 code, I think. And then otherwise, if there's any other type of error, we'll just render whatever that error says. Okay. This is generated in your app by default. Again, you have full control over it. So if you don't want this behavior, you can customize it. So let's go try this out. So project /1, that works correctly. You can see how there, just for a slight instance, the loading thing shows. So let's try to view project ID 10, which does not exist. 404 could not be found. Okay, and that happens all because of this line right here. this not found error, the default message for that is like not found, and I'll set the status code on there of 404. And so this thing is thrown all the way up through the stack into your pages folder, wherever page, wherever that went right here. So it comes up through here and it goes all the way into _app into this error component right here and renders that 404. Okay. Now the other thing will, same thing happens for authorization. So if we go back here, log out, and then try to go back to that, view that project, it just shows us a login page. And that is because right here. So session.authorize throws an authentication error because you're not logged in. And then right here, if that error is authentication error, we display the login form. Okay, so it's all like just automatically for you, tightly integrated back into front end. And I love it. I hope you do too. Lots of people do. Okay, let's jump back to my presentation here. Slides. Run through a few more things. So we have this feature called Blitz Recipes. This is based on Gatsby. Actually, not based on. It's similar to Gatsby Recipes. We both had the idea like simultaneously, and the implementations are a little bit different. But basically, it allows you to install third-party code with one command. So for example, Blitz install Tailwind will add all of the configuration needed for Tailwind to your app, dependencies, files, etc., with just one command. So you can, we don't have a lot of recipes available yet. Right now, it's kind of difficult to write them. We're going to be improving that, make it easier, and then adding more. Like ultimately, we'll have hundreds, thousands of recipes, hopefully. So currently we have Blitz install Chakra-UI, Blitz install Material UI, Blitz install Tailwind, Blitz install. I'm not sure. There's quite a few other that we have, but it's very nice for integrating third-party code. The alternative to this is having a bunch of examples, like an example of how to use Blitz with Tailwind, example of how to do that. But then you have to go copy and paste the code, and it's just kind of tedious. But this is very slick. Now you can write your own custom recipes. So you could, and the recipes can come from a GitHub repo or, and I'm not sure about NPM yet, but definitely GitHub repos. So you can write your own, like private, or it can be a file path too. So for your company, you could write recipes that, I don't know, do something. So it's an easy way to package shareable code. Okay, Blitz Console is very similar to Rails Console. If you've ever used that, it's a REPL that loads your code and allows you to just manually run anything. So we automatically load your database for you. So here in this, you can see an example of db.question.find many, and that's going to return all of the questions in the database. So this is really, really nice for running one-off commands. I use it for debugging production data. And so it's a very powerful tool. A few other big features that we have is a Passport.js adapter, which allows you to easily use almost any Passport.js strategy for social login. So you can easily add Twitter login, GitHub login, Facebook login, whatever else you want to do. There's also a magic link, like a passwordless adapter you can use. So check that out if you're interested in that. HTTP middleware is a way to read the request response objects, modify them, and add data to that context thing that actually goes into queries and mutations. So this is how we add our session middleware, is our built-in authentication stuff. Our session management is built using the middleware. So we have advanced data serialization, which automatically converts. So when you have a date object on the server, a date object, you can't send a date object over the network. It has to be converted to a string. So when it gets on the front end, you have to convert that string back to a date object if you want to manipulate it, right? Well, we do that automatically for you. So you don't even have to think about that thing anymore. It's awesome. So if you return a date on the server, it comes out as a date on the client. If you return a map or a set on the server, it comes out as a map or a set on the client. If you return an error object on the server or throw an error object, it comes out as an error object on the client. And we actually wrote a custom serializer called SuperJSON for that. All right, you can deploy Blitz to a server or serverless, which is sweet. So you're not locked into one or the other. If you run serverless, then all your endpoints are individual serverless functions, which is sweet. We have full custom server support, same as Next.js, so you can add WebSockets or anything else you need to do for complex use cases. And I already mentioned database agnostic. Okay. They mentioned I should talk about community history, but you're going to have to go read this because I'm out of time. But there's a page on our docs called History, and it tells about how Blitz got started. And basically, the TLDR is I built a community before the project, because when I launched the project, there really was no project. It was just a couple hundred lines of prototype code. There was not even a GitHub repo, but the tweet kind of went viral, and I got a bunch of people interested in helping build this. And here we are, almost a year later. So a couple testimonies from Twitter. So this fellow John says, I used Rails professionally for over a decade, and I feel 10 times more productive on Blitz already after just a few months. That's kind of mind-blowing. And this was just today. A fellow who works at Agolia, the search company, says that his colleagues wanted to use AWS Amplify for an internal tool, but it caused so many issues that they switched to Blitz, and it was just plug and play and just started working automatically. And then this was also today, someone else says that they're starting a project for a huge US university using Blitz. So we're starting to get a lot of traction, and we are just coming into beta transition right now. So this next release, 0.30.0, is going to be the beta release. So it's available in Canary right now. But that's like the official beta launch. And it's like, this is a good time to start using Blitz in production if you want. I've been using Blitz in production for many months and so have many others. And it's been working very well so far. So to get started, run npm i or yarn. You can use yarn too, but install the Blitz CLI globally, and then run blitz new my app. Okay, so we need your help. I'm not a billionaire, and there's no company, no rich company providing for this. It's just me donating my time. I've been working on this mostly full time since the beginning, so close to 11 months. Like most of the time, I average about 30 hours a week working on Blitz, and then I've also been doing consulting in addition to that to support myself. So I would love your help in any way. You can become involved as much as you want. We have maintainer levels. So we have level 1 maintainers, so level 2 maintainers, and then core team. And so you can work your way up the ranks if you want. And I'd love to have your help. You can contribute in any way you want. Code, documentation, videos, blog posts, courses. We already have some folks working on a book. I think there's at least 2 or 3 courses on Blitz that are in progress right now. There's already an egghead course, a mini egghead course. And yeah, so we love your help. And then also donations and sponsorships is a huge help. So you can, as an individual, you can start donate as much as $5 a month. And then we also have multiple sponsorship tiers for companies where you can get your logo on the README and the website. Now we're launching a new website within a week or two at the same time as the official beta launch. And so now's a good time if you're a company and you want to get your logo on the front page for the big beta launch, go sponsor Blitz right now. Thank you. And a couple of things here. So blitzjs.com. Blitzjs.com is the website and is where you would go to find documentation and how to get started. I am Flybear on Twitter, and you can follow. And thanks for watching.